1 year had passed since the Battle of New Bizen. The Varak Empire had retreated from 17 human colonies. Planets they had occupied for decades were suddenly abandoned. Their mighty fleets turned away from human borders and never returned. The galaxy had changed. Species who had cowered before the Varak for centuries now looked at them differently. The invincible empire was not so invincible after all. The unstoppable army could be stopped. All it took was 12 humans who refused to give up. Governor Yuna stood at the center of New Bizen's capital city. Around her, 2 million citizens had gathered for a celebration. Music played. Children laughed. Families embraced and cried tears of joy. It was a day of remembering and of looking forward. A new plaza had been built in the heart of the city. At its center stood a simple monument made of black stone. The monument had no fancy decorations, no dramatic sculptures, no grand statues. It was just a smooth pillar with 12 names carved into its surface. Lieutenant Hannah, Sergeant Wu, Corporal Sung, Corporal Mina, Corporal Hoon, Private Day, Private Nari, Private Era, Private J, Private Jin, Private Bomb Dot, and at the bottom, the words. They came when we needed them most. Today we celebrate our freedom, Yuna addressed the crowd. Her voice was strong and clear, carried across the plaza by speakers. 1 year ago, we faced destruction. We faced an enemy that had conquered 1,000 worlds. We faced death. She paused and looked at the monument. 12 soldiers answered our call. 12 ordinary people who became extraordinary warriors. They did not fight for glory or medals or recognition. They fought because our children were in danger. They fought because that is who they are. In the crowd, Captain Tay watched quietly. He wore civilian clothes now. He had retired from military service after the battle, satisfied that he had done his part. He lived in a small house near the forest where the first Varak patrols had disappeared. Sometimes, late at night, he would walk among those trees and remember, where are they now? A young boy asked his mother, the Special Forces? Are they here? The mother smiled and ruffled her son's hair. They are everywhere, little one, and nowhere. That is how they work. The truth was that none of the 12 were at the celebration. They had slipped away immediately after the Varak retreat, disappearing as quietly as they had arrived. No interviews, no parades, no public appearances. They were not interested in fame. They had other work to do. On a distant moon, Lieutenant Hannah was training the next generation of special forces. She stood before 50 young recruits, her face calm and patient. These young men and women had survived the hardest selection process in human history. They were the best of the best, the future guardians of humanity. The Varak are not our only enemies, she told them. The galaxy is full of threats. Some we know about, some we have not discovered yet. Our job is to be ready for all of them. A recruit raised his hand. Lieutenant, how did you defeat the Varak so easily? We have studied the recordings, but we cannot understand how you moved so fast, how you predicted their attacks. Hannah smiled slightly. Easily? There was nothing easy about it. We trained for 15 years. We failed 1,000 times before we succeeded once. We lost friends along the way. She touched the scar on her cheek. Every skill we have was bought with pain and sacrifice. She walked among the recruits, looking at each face. You want to know our secret? Here it is. We never stop training. We never stop learning. We never believe we are good enough. The moment you think you have reached your limit is the moment you start falling behind. The recruits listened with fierce attention. They would train harder after this. They would push themselves further. They would become the next generation of ghosts who struck with the force that made demons tremble. Sergeant Wu had chosen a different path. He returned to Earth and bought a small farm in the mountains of Korea. He grew vegetables and raised chickens and lived a simple, quiet life. His neighbors thought he was just a friendly old farmer with a scarred face and sad eyes. They did not know that he had fought in 30 campaigns across the galaxy. They did not know that his hands had ended more lives than he could count. They did not know that sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he still heard the sounds of battle. Young soldiers sometimes came to visit him. They traveled great distances to sit on his porch and drink tea and ask questions about the old days. Wu never told them war stories. Instead, he taught them about patience and discipline and finding peace within themselves. The hardest battle is not against your enemies, he told them. It is against yourself. Master yourself first, and everything else becomes possible. Private Day became a legend in the military academies. His movements during the Battle of New Bizen were studied by every recruit. They watched the footage in slow motion, trying to understand how he flowed through the Varak. Elite guard like water through stones. He never visited the academies personally. He was too busy serving on active missions across the galaxy. But sometimes he sent messages to promising students. Short notes with simple advice. Keep moving. Never stop. Speed is life. The other team members scattered across human space, each following their own path. Some continued to serve. Some retired to quiet lives. Some took teaching positions to pass on their knowledge. But they all stayed connected through a private network that only they could access. Every year, on the anniversary of the Battle of New Bizen, they gathered at a secret location. They shared a meal together and remembered the friends they had lost over the years. They laughed about old missions and argued about tactics and reminded each other why they had chosen this life. Do you ever regret it? Private Era asked one year. All the sacrifices? All the pain? All the things we gave up? Hannah thought about the question carefully. She had given up the possibility of a normal life. She had given up safety and comfort and the peace that ordinary people enjoyed. She had spent her best years preparing for violence instead of building a family. No, she said finally. I do not regret it. When I think about the children on New Bizen who grew up because of what we did, when I think about the families that stayed together, when I think about the future we protected, no, I do not regret a single moment. The others nodded in agreement. They had all made the same choice. They had all decided that some things were worth more than personal happiness. The galaxy continued to spin. New threats emerged. Old enemies gathered strength. The universe was dangerous and unpredictable and full of beings who wanted to destroy everything humanity had built. But humanity had guardians in the shadows between stars. Special Forces teams watched and waited. They trained constantly, pushing themselves beyond human limits. They studied every potential enemy, learned every weakness, prepared for every possibility. They were not superhumans. They were not enhanced or modified or changed by technology. They were simply ordinary men and women who had dedicated their lives to an extraordinary purpose. Governor Yuna ended her speech with words that would be remembered for generations. The Vorak called our special forces demons. They called them ghosts and nightmares and monsters. But I call them something different. I call them heroes. I call them protectors. I call them the reason we are standing here today, free and alive and full of hope. She looked at the monument one last time. They struck with a force that made demons tremble. And because of them, we are no longer afraid. The crowd cheered. The music played. The celebration continued long into the night. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, 12 soldiers listened to the broadcast and smiled. They did not need monuments or speeches or recognition. They did not need the galaxy to know their names. They were Special Forces. They were humanity's answer to every threat in the universe. and they would always be there, watching from the shadows, ready to strike when their people needed them most. That was their purpose. That was their legacy. That was enough. The sun rose over New Bizan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful morning, the kind of morning that made people grateful to be alive. In the city, refugees peeked out from their hiding places and looked toward the east where the Varak army was camped. The enemy had not moved. Governor Una stood on her balcony again, just as she had stood when the invasion first began. But today, her eyes held something different. Today, her eyes held hope. Captain Tay joined her with a cup of tea. He handed it to her without a word. They watched the sunrise together in comfortable silence. They did not leave, Una finally said. Krath rejected the offer. He did, Tay agreed. He believes his pride is more important than his soldiers' lives. What happens now? Tay smiled slightly. Now, Lieutenant Hana shows him his mistake. In orbit above the planet, Admiral Rock commanded the Varak fleet. He had 50 warships under his control, each one capable of destroying entire cities. He had been ordered to support the ground invasion, but so far, his involvement had not been needed. That was about to change. Admiral, his communications officer reported. We are receiving a message from the surface. From General Krath. Put it through. Krath's face appeared on the main screen. The general looked tired and angry. His golden throne room was visible behind him, but something was wrong. The room was almost empty. Guards who should have been standing at attention were nowhere to be seen. Admiral Rock, I need reinforcements immediately. 20,000 soldiers, delivered to my position within 2 hours. Rock frowned. General, you have 50,000 soldiers on the ground. Why do you need more? That is not your concern. Just send the reinforcements. I cannot send soldiers without understanding the tactical situation. What is happening down there? Krath's face twisted with rage. What is happening is that I am your superior officer, and I am giving you a direct order. Send the reinforcements now. The connection ended abruptly. Rock stared at the empty screen for a long moment. In all his years of service, he had never seen Krath act like this. The general was famous for his calm, his control, his absolute confidence in every situation. Something had broken that confidence. Get me intelligence reports from the surface, Rock ordered. Everything from the last 48 hours. I want to know what is going on. While the Admiral reviewed reports, Lieutenant Hana and her team were already in motion. They had spent the night positioning themselves around the Varak camp. Not to attack, but to watch. To wait. To prepare. Corporal Mina had hacked into the Varak communication systems hours ago. She had full access to their military network, their sensor data, their command frequencies. The enemy did not know it, but every message they sent was being monitored. Krath is calling for reinforcements, she reported to Hana. 20,000 soldiers. Good, Hana replied. Let them come. Private Day looked confused. Good? How is more enemies good? Because now we show them something they will never forget. Hana activated her communicator. All teams, prepare for Phase 3. We are going loud. Going loud meant no more stealth. No more shadows and silence. Phase 3 was about sending a message that the entire galaxy would hear. Private Jay was the team's technology and recording specialist. He had positioned dozens of small cameras throughout the area over the past 3 days. These cameras could broadcast live to any frequency, any network, anywhere in the galaxy. Cameras are ready, he confirmed. Broadcasting will begin on your command. Stand by. In the Varak camp, soldiers were preparing for the arrival of reinforcements. They believed that more warriors would solve their problems. They believed that numbers would guarantee victory. They did not understand what they were facing. At exactly noon, the attacks began. Not hidden attacks. Not silent strikes in the darkness. This time, the special forces hit openly and visibly, in broad daylight. With all their cameras recording. Sergeant Wu walked into a supply depot like he owned it. 20 guards saw him and raised their weapons. He did not slow down. He did not hide. He moved through them like a tornado through paper, his hands and feet striking with impossible speed. Every guard fell. The entire fight lasted 40 seconds. Corporal Sung destroyed 3 weapon platforms, while enemy soldiers watched in stunned amazement. He planted charges, waved at the cameras, and walked away just as the explosions lit up the sky behind him. Private Eris set up her rifle on a hill overlooking the camp. She started shooting the communication dishes one by one. Each shot was perfect. Each dish exploded in a shower of sparks. The Varak soldiers could see her position clearly. They fired back with everything they had. None of them could hit her. She moved between shots, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. It was like trying to shoot smoke. It was like trying to catch the wind. Lieutenant Hana walked directly toward General Krath's fortress. Soldiers rushed to stop her. Vehicles moved to block her path. Weapons fired from every direction. She kept walking. The cameras recorded everything. They showed a single human woman advancing through an army. They showed bullets and energy beams passing around her like she was protected by invisible shields. They showed soldiers attacking her and falling like their strings had been cut. Private J broadcast this footage across every Varak frequency. Every ship in orbit saw it. Every soldier on the ground saw it. Every commander and officer watched as their elite forces were dismantled by a small woman who showed no fear at all. Admiral Rock watched from his ship with growing horror. What am I looking at? His tactical officer could barely speak. Sir, those readings must be wrong. No human can move that fast. No individual can defeat that many soldiers. The readings are not wrong. Rock's voice was hollow. We are watching it happen in real time. The footage spread beyond the fleet. Other Vorak ships in other systems received it. Military command centers throughout the Empire saw the impossible events unfold. The story of New Bizin began traveling across the galaxy at the speed of light. In the camp, panic was spreading. Soldiers who had never run from anything in their lives were now running. They dropped their weapons and fled toward the landing zone. They pushed and shoved each other trying to reach the transport ships. General Krath screamed orders that no one followed. He threatened execution for cowardice, but his soldiers were more afraid of the ghosts outside than they were of their general. They had seen their friends fall. They had seen the impossible become real. They wanted to leave this cursed planet and never return. Private Nari detonated the charges she had planted during the night. The ammunition depot exploded in a massive fireball that lit up the entire valley. Secondary explosions followed as stored weapons and power cells ignited. The Varak army was in complete chaos. Lieutenant Hana reached the outer wall of Krath's fortress again. The guards on the wall looked down at her. They remembered what had happened last night. They remembered their brothers and sisters falling in the darkness. They threw down their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. Hana nodded at them once and kept walking. Inside, she found Krath standing alone in his throne room. His elite guard was gone. His officers had fled. His army was collapsing around him. He held his ceremonial blade in hands that shook with fury and fear. You cannot defeat the Varak Empire, he growled. Even if you kill me, more will come. 1 million more. 10 million more. We will never stop. I know, Hana said calmly. That is why we are not going to kill you. Krath blinked in confusion. What? We are going to let you live. We are going to let you tell everyone what happened here. We are going to let you explain to your emperor why 50,000 soldiers failed against 12 humans." She stepped closer, and Krath stepped back despite himself. Every time the Varak Empire thinks about attacking human space, they will remember you. They will remember this day. They will remember what human special forces can do. She turned and walked away. "That is worse than death," Krath whispered. "Yes," Hannah agreed. "It is." Above the planet, Admiral Rock made a decision. He ordered the fleet to withdraw, not because he was commanded to, but because he understood something important. This was not a battle the Varak could win. The reinforcement ships turned around before they even reached the planet. The ground forces scrambled to evacuate. Within 6 hours, not a single Varak soldier remained on New Bizin. The invasion was over, and across the galaxy, the legend of the Special Forces was just beginning to spread. 3 days had passed since the invasion began. 3 days of fear and confusion for the Varak army. 3 days of hope for the people of New Bizin. General Krath had moved his command center to a fortress near the landing zone. He surrounded himself with his elite guard, 200 of the finest warriors in the entire empire. These soldiers had never lost a fight. They had destroyed entire armies by themselves. They wore golden armor that marked them as the chosen of the emperor himself. Nothing could break through such defenses. Nothing could threaten such warriors, at least. That is what Krath believed. Lieutenant Hannah watched the fortress from a hill 3 miles away. She had been observing it for 18 hours, noting every patrol pattern, every guard position, every weakness in their defense. Most people would see an impossible target. She saw an opportunity. "The walls are reinforced with energy shields," Corporal Mina reported. She was the team's technology expert. She could hack any system, break any code, and disable any machine. Standard Vorak military grade. "I can bring them down for 30 seconds. 30 seconds is enough," Hannah replied. Private Jin studied the patrol schedules on his tablet. Guard changes happen every 4 hours. The weakest point is during the eastern rotation, between midnight and 12:15. Then, we move at midnight. Sergeant Wu cleaned his rifle in slow, careful movements. He had done this same task thousands of times before every mission. It was his way of preparing, of focusing his mind. What about the elite guard? 200 is a lot, even for us. Hannah smiled slightly. We do not need to fight all of them. We just need to reach Krath. The team spent the next 6 hours preparing. They checked their weapons, reviewed the plan, and rested when they could. As the sun set over New Bizin, they moved into position around the fortress at exactly midnight. Mina pressed a button on her device. The energy shields around the fortress flickered and died. Private Day was the first through the wall. He used a special climbing tool that let him scale the smooth surface in seconds. He reached the top, looked down at the guards below, and dropped among them like a falling star. The first guard fell before he knew he was under attack. The second guard turned just in time to see a fist coming toward his face. The third guard raised his weapon, but Day was already behind him, striking the nerve point at the base of his neck. 3 guards, down in 4 seconds. Silent, clean, professional. Corporal Soom and Private Nari entered from the south wall. They moved through the shadows like smoke, avoiding patrols and cameras with perfect timing. Nari planted small charges on the ammunition storage building. They would not detonate now. They would wait for the right moment. Sergeant Wu and Private Era took the west entrance. They encountered a patrol of 6 warriors and eliminated them without a single shot fired. Wu used his hands, his feet, and his knowledge of Varak anatomy to drop each enemy in seconds. Era covered him with her silent rifle, ready to shoot anything he missed. He did not miss. Lieutenant Hannah, Private Jin, and Corporal Hoon approached from the north. This was the most heavily guarded direction. the most obvious approach. The Varak expected any attack to come from here. They were right. Hannah walked toward the main gate in plain sight. The guards saw her immediately. They raised their weapons and shouted warnings. They demanded she stop and surrender. She kept walking. Fire! The guard captain ordered. 20 weapons fired at once. Energy beams and projectiles flew toward the small human woman walking calmly toward them. None of them hit her. Hannah moved like water, like wind, like something not entirely human. She flowed between the shots, under the beams, around the projectiles. She was there, then she was somewhere else, then she was even closer. The guards stopped firing. They could not understand what they were seeing. No one could move like that. No one could dodge that many shots. It was impossible. Hannah reached the gate. She stood among the guards who had just tried to kill her. They stared at her with red eyes wide in shock. "Hello," she said softly. "I am looking for your general." Then she moved. The guards fell around her like leaves in autumn. Each movement was precise and elegant. Each strike was perfectly placed. She did not waste any energy. She did not make any mistakes. She was a master of her craft, and her craft was combat. Jin and Hoon followed behind her, securing the path and handling any guard she missed. They were almost as skilled as she was, but watching her work still amazed them. She was the reason they had joined the Special Forces. She was the standard they tried to reach. Inside the fortress, alarms finally began to sound. General Krath jumped from his throne and grabbed his ceremonial blade. The blade had been carried by Varak generals for 3,000 years. It had killed emperors and destroyed planets. What is happening? He demanded. Shira rushed to his side. "We are under attack. The shields are down. Enemies have breached the outer walls." "How many enemies?" Shira checked her readings. "Our sensors show 12 signatures. 12. Kraft could not believe it. "Only 12? "Yes, General. But they are already inside the inner compound." Krath roared with rage. He had 180 elite guards still active. He had the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. He was the greatest warrior his species had ever produced. He would not be defeated by 12 humans. All guards to the command center. Kill these insects. The elite guards gathered in the central hall, forming a defensive ring around their general. They were ready for anything. They were prepared for any attack, but nothing could have prepared them for what came next. The lights went out. Complete darkness filled the room. The elite guards activated their night vision, but something was wrong with their helmet systems. All they saw was static dot in the darkness. They heard movement. Soft footsteps. Quiet breathing. The sound of something coming closer. Then the first guard fell. They heard his body hit the ground, but they could not see what happened. They fired their weapons in all directions, filling the darkness with light and noise. The energy beams showed brief glimpses of the room. Empty. The room seemed empty, but the guards kept falling. One by one, the elite warriors of the Varak Empire dropped. Some were hit by silent projectiles. Some were struck by hands they never saw. Some simply collapsed when pressure was applied to the right nerve points. Private Day laughed as he fought. He was having the time of his life. These were supposed to be the best warriors in the galaxy, and they could not even touch him. He moved through them like a ghost, striking and disappearing. Striking and disappearing. Sergeant Wu fought with cold efficiency. No wasted movements. No unnecessary risks. Each action served a purpose. Each strike achieved a goal. He was not fighting for glory or excitement. He was working. Lieutenant Hana made her way toward General Krath. She walked through the chaos like she was taking a stroll in a garden. Guards tried to stop her. Guards failed. When the emergency lights finally came on, only 20 elite guards remained standing. They formed a final ring around Krath, weapons raised, bodies shaking with fear they had never felt before. Hannah stood before them, completely unharmed. Her team gathered behind her, also unharmed. 12 humans against 200 of the galaxy's finest warriors, and the humans did not have a single scratch. "General Krath," Hannah said calmly, "I have a message for you." "What message?" Krath's voice was steady, but his eyes showed his fear. "Leave this planet. Take your army and go. Never return to human space." Krath laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "You think 12 soldiers can make demands of the Varak Empire? We have millions of warriors. We have thousands of ships. We will crush you." "You had 200 of your best soldiers protecting you," Hannah replied. "Now you have 20. Would you like to see what happens to the last 20? Krath looked at his remaining guards. He looked at the bodies covering the floor. He looked at the 12 humans standing before him without any fear at all. For the first time in his life, General Krath did not know what to do. Hannah turned and walked toward the exit. Her team followed. None of the remaining guards tried to stop them. "Consider my offer," she said over her shoulder. "You have until sunrise to begin your retreat. If your ships are still here when the sun comes up, we will show you what we are truly capable of." She disappeared into the night, and General Krath was left alone with his fear and his fallen warriors and a decision that would change everything. The Varak Empire had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. Their ships were massive, their weapons were powerful, and their soldiers were monsters. They stood 8 feet tall with skin like stone and eyes that glowed red in the darkness. They wore armor made from living metal that could stop any bullet. They had conquered more than 1,000 worlds. No species had ever defeated them in battle. When their fleet appeared above the colony of New Bizin, the people below knew that death had come for them. The sky turned black with ships. Drop pods fell like rain, crashing into the green fields and peaceful streets. Each pod carried 10 Varak warriors ready to kill. Governor Yuna stood on the balcony of her office and watched her world burn. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent 30 years building this colony into a home for 2 million people. Now she watched smoke rise from the eastern district where the first pods had landed. "They are moving fast," said Captain Tay. He stood beside her, calm and quiet. He was a tall man with a face that showed no emotion. His uniform was simple and black. "They will reach the city center within 6 hours. Can we stop them?" Yuna asked, though she already knew the answer. "Our defense force has 3,000 soldiers. The Varak have landed 50,000, with more coming." Tay looked at her with steady eyes. "We cannot win this fight with what we have." Yuna felt her heart sink. She thought of the families hiding in their homes. She thought of the children who would never grow up. She thought of everything she had built, about to be destroyed. "Then what can we do?" She whispered. Tay reached into his pocket and pulled out a small communication device. It was old and scratched, but his hand held it like it was the most precious thing in the universe. "I made a call 12 hours ago, when we first detected their fleet. Help is coming." "Help? From where?" "The nearest military base is 3 weeks away." Tay pressed a button on the device. A soft beep answered him. "Governor, have you ever heard of the Ghost program?" Yuna frowned. The name sounded familiar, like something from an old story. "I have heard rumors. Special soldiers. The best of the best. But I thought they were just legends. They are real." Tay looked up at the sky. "And they are here. High above the planet, a small ship dropped out of hyperspace. It was tiny compared to the massive Varak warships. It had no weapons, no shields, and no markings. It looked like nothing important at all. Inside the ship sat 12 humans in black armor. They did not speak. They did not move. They simply waited, their eyes closed, their breathing slow and steady. Lieutenant Hana opened her eyes first. She was young, only 28 years old, but she had seen more combat than most soldiers saw in a lifetime. Her face was calm, almost peaceful. A thin scar ran across her left cheek, a reminder of a battle she never talked about. "We are in position," said the pilot through the speakers. "Vorak fleet has not detected us. Drop zone is clear." Hannah stood up and looked at her team. 11 faces looked back at her. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the result of years of training, selection, and sacrifice. They had been chosen from millions of candidates. They had survived tests that killed most who attempted them. They had become something more than human. "Listen carefully," Hannah said, her voice soft but firm. 2 million civilians are down there. The Vorak will kill them all. Not because they need to, but because they enjoy it. That is what they do. That is who they are. Sergeant Wu checked his rifle for the 10th time. He was the oldest member of the team, 42 years old, with a body covered in scars. He had fought in 12 campaigns across the galaxy. He never smiled, and he never complained. He simply did his job, mission after mission. "How many enemies?" he asked. "Current count is 50,000 ground troops," Hana replied. "More landing every hour. We expect total enemy force to reach 100,000 within 2 days." Private Day laughed. He was the youngest of the group, barely 23. His hair was messy, and his eyes were always moving. He looked like a boy who should be in school, not a warrior who had killed more enemies than he could count. 50,000? That is not fair. You are right, said Corporal Soong with a small smile. They should have brought more. The team did not laugh, but something passed between them. Understanding, confidence. They had faced impossible situations before. They had always won. Hannah pulled up a holographic map of the colony. Red dots covered the display, showing enemy positions. Blue dots showed civilian areas. There was so much red that the map looked like it was bleeding. We drop in teams of 2. Soong and Nari, you take the eastern approach. Wu and Day, you have the south. Mina and Jay, disable their communications. Era and Bomb, find their supply lines. She pointed to each position as she spoke. Jin and Hoon, you are with me. We go straight for their command center. And then? Private Nari asked. She was a quiet woman who rarely spoke. Her specialty was explosives. She could destroy a building with materials found in any kitchen. Then we show them what happens when they threaten our people. The ship descended through the atmosphere, invisible to enemy sensors. The team moved to the drop bay, where 12 pods waited for them. These pods were different from Vorak drop pods. They were small, silent, and designed to land without any trace. Captain Tay's voice came through their communicators. Ghost Team, this is ground command. The Vorak general is named Krath. He has never lost a battle. His soldiers believe he is invincible. He has never fought us, Hana replied. No, he has not. There was something like hope in Tay's voice. Good luck, Lieutenant. Hana climbed into her pod. The door closed around her, sealing her in darkness. She felt the familiar press of acceleration as the pod launched. Through a small window, she could see the planet growing larger and larger. Below her, the Vorak army marched toward the city. They burned everything in their path. They killed anyone they found. They laughed and celebrated, because they believed victory was already theirs. They did not know that 12 humans were falling from the sky. They did not know that these humans had trained their entire lives for this moment. They did not know that across the galaxy, species whispered about soldiers who moved like ghosts and struck like thunder. The pods hit the ground in perfect silence. 12 soldiers emerged into the darkness. They disappeared into the forest without a trace, The Varak general would send his first patrol into those woods within the hour. None of them would return. The battle for New Bizin had begun, and the Varak Empire was about to learn a lesson they would never forget. They were about to learn why humanity called their elite warriors special forces. They were about to learn that some humans were forged into weapons that could make even demons tremble. And by the time they understood, it would already be too late. The forest was dark and quiet. Tall trees blocked the light from the 3 moons above. Strange insects made soft sounds in the bushes. The air smelled like wet earth and burning smoke from the distant city. 30 Varak soldiers marched through this forest. They walked in formation, their weapons ready, their red eyes scanning the shadows. They were looking for survivors who had run from the city. Easy targets. Easy kills. Their leader was a veteran named Grok. He had fought in 40 campaigns and killed thousands of enemies. He feared nothing in the universe. His soldiers followed him without question because he always brought them victory. Spread out, Grok ordered. Check every shadow. Kill anything that moves. His soldiers obeyed. They moved through the trees like hungry predators. They expected to find frightened civilians hiding behind rocks and bushes. They expected screaming and begging and the sweet taste of easy conquest. They found nothing. For 20 minutes, they searched. For 20 minutes, they found only empty forest. Grok was getting angry. His superiors expected results. They expected prisoners to torture and bodies to count. There is nothing here, one soldier complained. The humans have fled further. Grok opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He felt something strange on his neck. Something cold and sharp. His hand reached up and found a thin metal dart sticking out of his skin. His vision went blurry. His legs stopped working. He fell to the ground without a sound. All around him, his soldiers fell too. One by one, they dropped like stones. No screams. No warnings. Just 30 warriors collapsing in perfect silence. Corporal Sung stepped out from behind a tree. He held a small weapon that looked like a tube with no features. He walked among the fallen Varak, checking each one. All alive but sleeping deeply. Target neutralized, he whispered into his communicator. 30 hostiles down. No casualties. Private Nari appeared beside him. She moved so quietly that even Sung did not hear her approach. Why keep them alive? Lieutenant wants them to wake up, Sung explained. She wants them to tell others what happened. Fear is a weapon too. They disappeared back into the forest, leaving 30 unconscious enemies behind. When those soldiers woke up hours later, they would remember nothing except falling asleep standing up. They would not understand what had happened. That confusion would turn into fear, and fear would spread like fire. General Krath received the report in his command center. He sat on a throne made from the bones of a species he had destroyed long ago. Around him, screens showed the invasion progress. Everything was going according to plan, except for one small problem. What do you mean they are all unconscious? He demanded. The messenger trembled before him. They woke up in the forest, General. All 30 of them. They remember nothing. No wounds, no signs of attack. They simply fell asleep. Impossible. Varak warriors do not fall asleep on patrol. Yes, General. That is what we thought too. Krath waved his massive hand and dismissed the messenger. He turned to his tactical officer, a female Varak named Shira, who had served him for decades. What do you think? Shira studied the data on her screen. Humans have chemical weapons that cause unconsciousness. Nothing unusual there. But to use them on 30 soldiers without any soldier raising an alarm, that requires extreme skill or extreme luck. With respect, General, luck does not work like this. Someone wanted those soldiers to live. Someone wanted them to wake up and report back. Krath considered her words. He had conquered many species in his long life. He had seen tricks and traps and desperate attempts at resistance. None of them had ever worried him. But something about this situation felt different. "Send another patrol," he ordered. 50 soldiers this time, equipped with gas filters and full sensor gear. "I want to know what is out there." The second patrol entered the forest 2 hours later. They were better equipped, more alert, and more numerous. They expected an ambush. They expected traps and hidden enemies. What they found was much worse. Private. They watched them from the branches of a tall tree. He hung upside down, completely motionless, invisible against the dark sky. His heat signature was masked by special technology in his suit. His heartbeat was slowed to almost nothing. He could stay in this position for hours without tiring. Below him, the Vorak patrol moved in careful formation. They checked every tree, every rock, every shadow. They were looking in all the right places. They never thought to look up. Sergeant Wu moved on the ground, sliding between trees like water flowing through rocks. He was a ghost made flesh, a shadow with hands and eyes. He placed small devices on trees as he moved. Each device was the size of a coin. Each device contained enough explosive to bring down a building. When the patrol reached the center of the forest clearing, Wu pressed a button. The trees erupted in light and sound. Not explosions of fire, but explosions of noise and brightness. The Vorak soldiers screamed and covered their eyes. Their sensitive ears rang with pain. They fired their weapons wildly, hitting nothing but trees and air. They dropped from his branch. He landed on a Vorak soldier and put him to sleep with a single touch to the neck. He moved to the next enemy, then the next, flowing through the chaos like a dancer at a deadly performance. Wu emerged from the shadows with his rifle. Each shot was perfect. Each shot hit exactly where he aimed, striking nerve points that paralyzed without killing. Vorak warriors fell all around him, unable to move, unable to fight, unable to do anything but watch. Within 90 seconds, all 50 soldiers were down. They stood among the fallen bodies, breathing hard. Even after years of training, the rush of combat still excited him. That was almost too easy. "Do not get comfortable," Wu warned. This was just the beginning. "They will send more. Let them." They smiled in the darkness. "I am just getting started." Back at the command center, General Krath received another report. 50 more soldiers were down. No deaths, but no conscious warriors either. They had been defeated by enemies they never even saw. For the first time in his long career, Krath felt something he had not felt in centuries. It took him a moment to recognize the emotion because it was so unfamiliar. Fear. He looked at Shira with new understanding in his eyes. "These are not ordinary humans." "No, General. I do not believe they are. Find out everything you can about human special military forces. Everything. I want to know what we are dealing with." Shira bowed and left to complete her task. She searched through every database, every report, every piece of intelligence the Vorak had ever gathered about humanity. What she found made her blood run cold. Humans had many military forces. They had armies and navies and air forces like every other species. But they also had something else. Something that other species did not have. They had soldiers specifically designed to fight impossible battles. Soldiers trained to defeat armies with small teams. Soldiers who could disappear into any environment and strike without warning. Soldiers who specialized in breaking enemy morale through fear and confusion. Humans called them Special Forces. Other species called them Nightmares, and 12 of them were now hunting the Vorak army anew. BUSAN. Shira returned to General Krath with her report. When she finished speaking, the general sat in silence for a long time. He looked at his screens, showing his massive army. He looked at his warships orbiting above. He looked at all his power and all his strength. Then he looked at the forest where 80 of his soldiers had fallen to enemies they could not see. "Pull back all patrols," he ordered finally. "Establish a defensive perimeter around the landing zone. No one enters that forest." "General?" Shira was surprised. Krath never retreated. Krath never showed weakness. "I am not retreating," he growled. "I am being cautious. There is a difference." But they both knew the truth. The greatest general of the Varak Empire was afraid of 12 humans hiding in the dark, and his fear was only the beginning.